So in this next one, we're going to go through lips, so the basic ideas of what the lips are in terms of their perspective, and then how to think about adding them into the total of the face so that you get not only the lips, but you don't lose that underlying form of the denture sphere to support them. What I think you should not do is this. We want to try to avoid anything that's overly simple or stylized for the lips. The reason is I'd lose all the hard work that I put together there. So I want to make sure, number one, that I keep the denture sphere as prominent, that we don't lose that. And then two, we could show the lips almost in the exact same way that we thought of the eye there. I can do a kind of a similar example here. Let's say this is the denture sphere, so cross section, so these would be teeth. What's really important to me here is just like the eye, where we had that height and depth, that the lips are shown the same way. So your lips sit on top of the denture sphere, like this, right, and would be comprised of muscle and skin and fat. The muscle would probably be about this much. So what I have is three surfaces. I have the outside of the lips, which is always a little coarser because there's more keratin. I would have the vermilion border, aptly named because it's a little warmer and redder. And then you would have the third plane, which would be the part that moves across the teeth. That's called mucosa. Just to get you thinking out of this, right? No more flat design lips. So we want to be reconciling with three planes, or however many, at least two of what you see. So that's the first. The second would be, just like we did with the eye, what is the basic design of the eye in terms of its orientation across the form? Lips, I like to focus on an M and a W. And you could peak and change and create different versions of this based on the person you see. You could think of there being small white lip portion muscles inside that would peak these curves. So you can make this M really exaggerated, or you can make it really thin and stretched out and long or simple. And then the bottom I think of as a W. So we have that, and then we could come up with the same type of thinking. The W on the bottom could be any version. It could be full or thin. So you could make this, you could really gesture it. The lips would be attaching to a node that will design like a kind of a chubby triangle. And that muscles would attach to that and pull this in different directions that would give you expressions, or the projection of an expression. You could also think of this as artificially changing. You have like a Beverly Hills Housewives lips that are more duck-like and full and hyper-exaggerated. So you could just collect lips or be aware of lips for all their cool variations. But this is still insufficient, right? Because this is still a shape. It's a good diagram maybe to remember what's there, but I want to take it a step further and let's think about, in the abstract, let's say that there's denture sphere first. Let's just say this is a form or a barrel form to represent where the teeth would be, and that maybe the node for the mouth is out here. Right. As far as muscles go, this would be a really complex area of form. So this is the most important part for us, right? Since we established that we're horrible at biting, we've compensated for that by talking to people. Right? Instead of trying to eat a cow in a field, you could drive to McDonald's and order at the drive-thru with your mouth, and they'll give you food. So this is a whole nest of muscles. It's kind of the most complex part for us, and lots of different poles and expressions and shapes for the production of sound. So we're going to bypass that and just go to the lips and how I'll break these shapes into perspectives. The first part is the center line that we began with has to come back and acknowledge the basic sphere of the mouth. So that would be my first order of business, is getting this wrapping line to no longer just reference a flat proportion, but to circumvent a form. Second, my pieces, right? So I'm going to break these into three. I always try to think of the upper lip as a series of three shapes. So you kind of have this triangle in the middle, and then I have two triangles on the sides. And these to me look like door wedge shapes, like the ones on the sides. So this looks like a little door wedge. This one kind of looks like your keystone, but maybe a little sharper. And then have the same thing on this side. So this first step is just M and W. M and W are kind of like the gesture. Maybe you could use those to do quick studies of all the cool different types of lips. This would be a nice lead in or transition into your perspective of the lips. Bottom, so W. W could be thought again as something more perspective based. So here I think of commas, that your lower lip is, it doesn't have to be, but occasionally it's fuller, and then it has a tuck up and into the corner. So if I can do this, if I can think of them as graphic or flat shapes, now I could take this and start to think it here, where they're leaned, right? The intention of this little diagram or illustration is to point your attention to the idea that the lips are positioned like your eyelid, right? Where they have that forward diagonal in space. So if I'm going to draw them here, here's a 1, 2, 3, or a way to kind of approach the thinking of the lips. First, so I have my wrapping line, that's number 1. 2, what is your M and your W? So maybe just take that and begin to wrap it across. So that would be here. I'm going to start there. Then I'm going to pull these across. What matters most is that you've established that midline, right? So if I have that midline or that wrapping center set up, I can almost do whatever design I want here. And if it comes back, as long as it comes back to that, I'm going to have perspective almost no matter what. Lower lip, I'm going to focus on that center of the W and then just echo the perspective. So that perspective echo is that. So that gets me a lot of the way there, but what I haven't yet done is the space. So let's start here. Let's take that little piece, we'll move it over here. So what I want to show with this is that it is seen from above, or it has a depth. So it has to be this. Your lips aren't paper thin, right? That's again what I'm trying to share in this example. So I want to try to show that it has a plane change where there's a depth and then a distance as it moves back into the face. So how would we do that? I'll just add a top plane. So let's just give this a depth and pull that forward. If you look or if you think about it, I'm sure you've seen a little highlight there or a little catch light. That would be that additional thickness to the top plane of the lip. If you struggle to see this, you can also use, this is something that we'll do when we start to incorporate this more with the face, but this would be your philtrum shape. So the bottom of your nose has this nice philtrum shape that will lead directly into that. And so I like to think of the planes of the mouth as 3, 2. This would be 1, 2 as it drops back, 3 as it drops back. I mean, it does look to me very much like an eye, like an eyelid. Like this, if the eye was shut, maybe this would be the same kind of structure of the lid, except there's teeth inside and not an eyeball. Right, the sides, you could do the same thing. Right, I want this to read as a door wedge. So maybe I'll just take that depth, pull it back and down. And so now this comes out, depth, plane change. So why is the plane change important? I would say for lighting. Haven't you ever noticed that even light is asymmetrical. There's form and cast shadows that pretty formulaically fall their way down the face. With top lighting, it's almost always the case that all of this plane is in shadow, form shadow, and then it almost always results in some kind of cast shadow being produced onto the fullness of the lower lip. Right, so we always get that, and then that becomes a form shadow, right, and then casts into the secondary area. So just getting an awareness of that area of volume always makes the lips feel like they have a bit more life, and then gives me a bit more in terms of understanding the structure for likeness or for production of light and shadow. This part, right, as long as this hangs or reflects the bigger ideas of the perspective of the mouth, then I could design whatever fullness I want. Maybe I just kind of curve this into a bit of a wobble, or I'm picking up on the transition into this part. And that will become the fullness of the lower lip. What I usually will look for around this area is pretty common that you might see a highlight or some kind of difference in light and shadow, and I'll use that as a point to run a line through. And so you could use this to start to sweep a line across and back up to the other side. That would be an indication of a corner here. So that goes like this, and now we have another perspective for the lips, the lower lip there being added. And so that top plane, bottom plane. So this was really more a ball, right? But I'm using that area of the highlight just to give me some clue as to where that corner is best turned. And then you could do the same thing. So 1, 2, 3, or 2, 3 planes across. This pulls forward. Like look at the planes in total. Forward, back, forward, back, this would be the plane, kind of that absent plane under the lower lip. This a little bit lower or less developed because the muscle of the mouth sits more on the corner. This space has been left empty for us to grow the soul patch. And then we could make our 3 plane changes. So that might go back this way, and then this comes back. But notice all the asymmetry, right? It's not just an asymmetry of forward, back. It's also an asymmetry of out, in. Right? In these smaller planes of the eye and the mouth, and in some cases even the nose that I showed you prior. So that's my thinking of the mouth, from the M to the shapes, to the understanding of its perspectives in terms of forward and back, and then how I might reconcile that on top of the denture sphere, and then curve that denture sphere into being something that might be more planar. So we could take a look at a couple examples now. Okay, so in doing this one, let's take and inch our way down. So maybe if I'm at all confused about how to start, I could begin by finding the plane change from the nose down to the top or center of the lip. That would be the philtrum shape. So this comes forward. That might be a good marker for how wide to make the lips. It just gives me that continuation down, or maybe I realize I need to make that a little straighter or try to match it to the model a bit more. I have a nice sense for where my wrapping line is. So there's my proportion, but adjusted for the curvature of the denture sphere. And now we can look at, let's do our M and W. So if I try to be more careful thinking about his lips, maybe that M looks a little bit more peaked towards the center. And so it's more like, instead of the one kind of evenly spaced like I made, it feels like it's longer at the sides and then maybe more peaked there. So this would be an example of how you could start to think about the difference. It's moderate, but still fun. And then maybe the lower lip is fuller. Let's see, kind of taking and making note of that. Maybe you'd want to give a character a different type or style of lip. Here's my center piece, or that arrow, kind of pointing down. And then maybe I'll use the plane change here. That's pretty small in the larger context, but I could see a light and shadow difference on his lips there, that this top plane for me registers as being a little bit lighter. So that would be that little bump or that little plane change. And then from there I would start to see more of the door wedge. So that could be fuller, and then sweeping back and down. And I am looking and aware that that feels like it's leading this way. So just desperately trying to avoid flat lips more than anything. And then this ends around here, tapers a bit, and then I could see that this would be the attachment for the node. And then on this side we're foreshortened, so that means I just lose it, or I just lose the lips. So I could end it quicker, just like every other thing that we foreshortened. As I move past or beyond my center line, our symmetry line that we set up early on in our drawing process, the same design would just be shorter, abbreviated. So maybe this just ends here, but it's doing the same thing. Right? The whole that I'm working on is that comes forward, this comes back. Lower lip, that has to begin at the middle by echoing that perspective line or ring. So that keeps our perspective. This, if it helps, right, you could think of the drop of that plane, the philtrum shape. It might give you a center. You could think of that dropping back here. And then you could nest that on top of your chin. So that would be that backward plane on the understructure of the lip. And then what is the design of your lower? Well, I can kind of see some highlights in here. You don't have to draw those, but what that tells me is that comes forward, this goes back. So that would be the plane break or the plane change for the lower lip. And then I'll just tuck that up or bring that up into the corner of the mouth. And now we'd have that fullness built over, right? That's additional form, just like the eyelid, built over and on top of the mouth. To bring out these planes a bit more, we could just kind of lightly put in that top plane so that we get that forward, out, back, forward, back. Here's the side. So a few things that might help in terms of recognizing the lips as either present or absent. Sometimes what I'll think about here is we can develop a lot of fat on this part of the face. So this would be called the buccal fat. It's in part to support the movement of the buccinator muscle, which is the outside part of the lip here, so lip stretcher. This can either conceal or reveal a lot about the face. So sometimes people will have a lot of fullness in this area. Like I think of Amy Winehouse as a good example of this. Is characteristic to her face or her look is that this part of her face, which is not the malar, it's not the cheek fat, is fuller. And then an example of somebody maybe that doesn't have that would be like Ed Harris, if you know who that is, a character actor, I guess. He has a marked lack of buccal fat, and that makes the structure and the look of his face very plainer. So in his face, it's almost as if you could see the disc of muscle around very directly as having a thickness, and it kind of comes off and then down, and then you're just kind of into some of a concave space, and then back and up over maybe the chewing muscles in the back. So we'll mark that down as an area to be aware of in terms of larger pads or areas of fat that can impact the way that you think likeness. So let's put it here. And what I'm thinking about for these, I'm just showing you the big ones that create larger forms around the face, cheek, mouth. It can impact the shape or the look of a face. But this isn't exhaustive or all of them. So this would be kind of just thinking loosely about the placement of buccal fat, right? Because there could be, sometimes people have another piece of fat that lives right here. I think of Vince Vaughn as an example of that. He has looks like a little cashew that lives up on the top corner of the mouth. There's lots of these, but for the big ones that I think would help get your faces feeling softer and maybe even aid in likeness, these would be good ones to start. And then the last one that I would also associate with the lips, because it reacts to speech and a lifetime of speech, would be jowl fat. And jowl fat is a final little bump here that would respond to age, or would be a good use of advancement of age in a character or a drawing. I kind of think of this as something that is more 60s, 70s. Jowl fat will drop below the mandible at a certain age. I think of like Judi Dench. I think she's always had jowl fat that's dropped below her mandible. Right? It would respond to a lifetime of use of the mouth, but it always feels like it ages my characters, because if you just take this part of the mandible and interrupt it with the sag of that, this always feels like an appropriate aging, right? Where that, it's almost just like a detour of the mandible. That would be the impact of jowl fat. Albert Einstein had it. I could think of pictures of him where you could see this. And that would be it. So around the mouth, you're kind of thinking of those basic structures in addition to the shapes of that M or W. And then these would just be some supporting components if you want to start to add a little bit more of the soft tissue areas around the face. Okay, so let's add these here. I'm going to have my perspective line already worked out. So got my fat positioned on either side. Now let's bring down, so here's my nose. You could think of trying to build relationships here. So the philtrum is pulling up and inside on either side. So there, just to help make that transition down, this drops. So just now thinking about the perspective of this area or space, that would be pulling back. And now think about the M. We'll just design our M. So kind of looks like a Cupid's bow. Maybe you could think of it that way too, if you like that. Down, and then in, maybe a little lower, and then back and up. Here's the push. So that's the triangle coming down. Same on this side. W, a little fuller. And then I think we'd have some proportion differences here that I would have moved around more at the construction stage. Let's lightly lay in some of those plane changes too. So here's that centerpiece. And then I'm just thinking of the mouth now more as these three planes folding across. Might help with shading. Sometimes it's just a little easier than being only having that ball under there to work with. And then I'd have the same above. Right, so let's just carve these to be a little flatter. 1, 2. This is that furrow caused by the malar fat, but for him, just very subtle. This side, it's more diagrammed and heavy. So that's the triangle, and then drop that. We could even plane it if you want, try to give it more of that precision, give the peak. Sometimes you could see that on people really well. And then on this side, we can pull this back. So that'd be our top plane for this. So let's get a sense of the form. Skin comes out, pushes over. This changes direction and pulls back. Here's where the lips are parting. Same thing here, so pull this out, and then back and in. So tuck that back. If it gets stuck, you can use the planes that I'm setting up, that I did these around the mouth. You can let those help inform the way that you're structuring your feature. I could also take the mouth, I think you see this in Loomis, and break it into 3 too. Like maybe that's the center. If you don't connect with those comma shapes, then start to pull that. So this plane could match that side. This plane matches the center. This plane matches that side. And then look for your highlight and then find your plane change. It ultimately doesn't really matter how you get there as long as you're developing perspective and seeing form with a bit more clarity. And now we could see this is a top, maybe a side or a bottom, and then that changes. Now we'd be onto this surface. Right, and if we feel this across with a surface line, that comes out. This goes back. All important for shadow. That comes out. Same thing up here. Maybe we could soften some of these a little bit more. We have our planes. Now let's get this form to be a bit more. Like now if I start to look at this, I could see this plane is getting some light. And so that's a plane that's chopping back and then cross and then back and up. And then on this side, I already curved it, but you could think of the plane of that area of the mouth as going this way. So final thoughts, these are kind of more in-depth developments of the features aided in the structure around them. So each time I'm thinking an eye, I'm trying to borrow in principles of anatomy and fat just to inform the way that I think about its space. For you, it doesn't have to be that these are anatomy drawings or that you have to take in all of this information. I just want to give you a broader awareness and understanding of why these planes are there, because they're so difficult and challenging to see. At the very end, what matters most is that you're able to build form and think about these features on top of the head in a way that still is somewhat three-dimensional.